What happens when the smallest voice in the galaxy refuses to kneel? The broadcast had rippled across 1,000 worlds, a message encoded in every known frequency of the galactic network. The Council's seal burned into the void, 6 golden stars circling a black sun, and their decree rang out in 12 tongues. All independent systems will now fall under Council protection. Compliance ensures survival. Resistance ensures extinction. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. In the cold silence of space, no world dared to respond. None. Except one. Earth. It began as a whisper in the static. A human voice, trembling but defiant, cut through the broadcast. "We are not subjects. We are not yours." The transmission lasted only 13 seconds before it was jammed, but in those 13 seconds, humanity did something no other species had dared in centuries. They said no. To the Galactic Council, that word was heresy. To the rest of the galaxy, it was a spark. From the high orbit of Vorel Prime to the crimson deserts of Exthun, beings paused in disbelief. Empires that had bowed long ago remembered the taste of freedom and fear. Who were these humans, these late arrivals from the outer spiral, who thought themselves above the Council's decree? The Council convened within the core spire, an artificial world larger than Jupiter, where light never dimmed and no shadow dared to linger. 12 archons presided, each representing a sector of power older than most civilizations. When Earth's defiance appeared on their screens, murmurs filled the chamber like a rising storm. Primitive species, no FTL trade rights, no recognized fleet. Then they should fall quickly. But Archon Kethar, the oldest among them, his eyes like dying suns, watched the replay in silence. "No," he said softly. "They will not fall quickly. The defiant never do." Meanwhile, back on Earth, the world had changed overnight. The moment the Galactic Council's decree arrived, every satellite had gone dark. GPS, communications, power grids, offline. For 3 hours, the planet was blind, and when systems came back online, something was waiting in orbit. 12 silver obelisks, each a mile long, hovering silently above major cities. No sound, no visible weapons, no communication, just presence. In Washington, D.C., President Elias Vance stood before the Emergency Council, his reflection fractured across the holographic screens. "They're not attacking," he said. "They're watching." Dr. Mara Quinn, chief astrophysicist of the International Defense Network, adjusted her glasses, eyes wide. "They don't need to attack. Those structures are broadcasting a quantum tether. They can shut us down again anytime they want." "So what do we do?" a general asked. A general. Vance's gaze lingered on the orbital feed, the silver obelisks casting faint shadows over the Earth's blue curve. "We make them regret underestimating us." Humanity had always been defiant, often foolishly so. When the oceans rose, they built walls. When war burned continents, they rebuilt. When the void called itself infinite, they reached out anyway. Defiance was their oldest instinct. Within weeks, the global scientific community, long divided by politics and funding, united under one banner: Project Siren. The goal wasn't to fight the Council head-on, it was to make them listen, to create a signal strong enough to pierce their blockade and echo across the stars. In hidden labs beneath the Arctic ice, engineers fused alien math with human creativity, deciphering fragments of Council tech scavenged from black market traders. In orbit, rogue pilots launched stolen shuttles to shadow the obelisks, mapping their structure molecule by molecule. And deep within the deserts of Nevada, an experimental quantum reactor, illegal, unstable, beautiful, came online for the first time. It wasn't about war. It was about message. The same way a candle defies the dark by simply existing. But not everyone agreed. From the shadows of Earth's cities, panic spread. The wealthy fled underground bunkers. Corporations offered deals to surrender early for preferential status under council protection. Even within the government, cracks formed. Not all believed resistance was possible. Meanwhile, far beyond the solar rim, whispers of Earth's defiance reached the unlikeliest corners. Pirate clans in the Vega sectors tuned in to intercepted transmissions. Refugee colonies on dying moons replayed the human broadcast again and again. Some called Earth mad, others called them brave. But to the oppressed, the enslaved and the forgotten, Earth became a symbol. The world that said no. Back in the core spire, Archon Kethar watched these reactions with unease. One act of rebellion can echo farther than an army, he told the council, but his peers dismissed him. Then let them echo. Soon they will be ash. Fleet Sigma was dispatched. 50 dreadnoughts armed with subspace lances capable of slicing a planet in half. The mission, bring Earth to its knees. When the fleet arrived at the edge of the solar system, humanity was ready, at least as ready as any world could be against gods. The obelisks in orbit suddenly shifted formation, aligning like mirrored blades. For the first time, they spoke, not to Earth, but to the fleet. A single tone, deep and resonant, rolled through space. Then came a translation. Stand down. This world is under protection. Confusion rippled through the fleet. By whose authority? The admiral demanded. By ours, came the reply. And then in a shimmer of light, the obelisks vanished, revealing something vast behind them. A structure cloaked in light distortion, the size of a continent. Not human, not council, something else. Back on Earth, Project Siren reached critical stage. The quantum reactor pulsed with a rhythm that defied physics. Dr. Quinn's voice trembled as she monitored the readouts. It's responding to something out there, like it's not alone. The signal they'd built was no longer theirs. It was merging, harmonizing with an external source. The frequencies folded into each other like a duet across the cosmos. And for one blinding moment, every screen, every radio, every heartbeat on Earth resonated with a sound not heard in millennia. A voice, not human, not machine, something ancient buried in the starlight. Children of Earth, it said, your defiance has been noted. Around the galaxy, sensors flared to life. Entire systems blinked out as if silenced by unseen hands. The Council's core spire trembled as ancient codes, locked since the dawn of their empire, reactivated. What have they awakened? Kethar whispered. No one answered. On Earth, the power grid exploded. The reactor went critical. The sky turned white for 7 seconds and then silence. The obelisks shattered, falling like silver rain through the atmosphere. No casualties, just fragments, and an eerie calm. 3 days later, a new star appeared in the night sky, where none should have been. Astronomers couldn't explain it. It pulsed every 13 seconds, the exact length of Earth's defiant broadcast. President Vance stood before the fractured United Nations, his voice weary but resolute. They wanted submission, he said. Instead, they reminded us who we are. Across the stars, millions listened in secret. On mining worlds, soldiers paused their labor. On orbital colonies, children watched that new star flicker and whispered the word that had started it all. No, but something else was happening, something the humans didn't yet understand. Deep within the void, beyond mapped space, colossal structures stirred. Sleeper fleets, long dormant, reactivated. Their origins, unknown. Their allegiance, unreadable. But their trajectory was clear. They were heading toward the core spire, and at their forefront was a symbol that hadn't been seen in over 10,000 years. A spiral of light identical to Earth's own galactic position. The Council tried to block the news, but rumors spread faster than containment. The story of Earth's defiance had become more than rebellion. It was a signal, a calling. The old ones had heard. In the quiet aftermath, Dr. Mara Quinn stood alone on the shattered remains of the reactor complex. Snow fell softly through the ruins. She looked up at the pulsing star overhead and whispered, "What did we wake?" The wind carried no answer, only the distant hum of something vast, growing closer with every heartbeat. And somewhere in the endless dark, beyond the reach of any council or empire, a voice, calm, ancient, unyielding, spoke once more. Defiance, acknowledged. The stars shuddered. Then the signal cut to black. Silence. That was all that followed the final pulse of the star. In the days after the light appeared, Earth seemed to hold its breath. The world was scarred but alive. Cities flickered with unstable power, and the skies still glimmered faintly with drifting fragments of the shattered obelisks. People gathered on rooftops at night, staring upward as that strange new star pulsed rhythmically in the void. 13 seconds on, 13 off. The heartbeat of something immense. Dr. Mara Quinn hadn't slept since the blast. The cold air burned her lungs as she climbed what was left of the observation ridge above the reactor crater. The snow there was faintly luminescent now, glowing with a soft silver sheen. She held up her scanner. It chirped erratically, its data corrupted by radiation that shouldn't have existed. Residual energies reading like a fusion signature. Her assistant murmured, shivering beside her. But it's patterned, almost like a transmission. Mara squinted at the horizon. Not almost, she said quietly. It is a transmission. The signal wasn't gone. It had embedded itself into Earth's atmosphere, encoded in the ionosphere, hidden in every gust of wind, every flicker of northern light. The world itself was now speaking in the same rhythm as the pulsing star. President Vance received the report 2 days later inside the reinforced command bunker beneath Geneva. The room buzzed with tension. Scientists, generals, intelligence officers all waited as the hologram of the star expanded before them, its rhythmic pulse painting the chamber in blue light. "So you're saying the planet is resonating with that thing?" Vance asked, voice low. Mara nodded. "Not resonating, sir. Synchronizing. It's as if Earth has become part of a larger network." "Network," he repeated, turning to face the projection. "Are we part of it, or are we the center?" No one answered. No. Outside the bunker, the world was changing. Strange electromagnetic storms rolled across the equator, bending auroras into spiraling patterns never seen before. Radio frequencies began to overlap, broadcasting whispers that weren't human. Some heard voices in their sleep, words that dissolved upon waking, leaving only the echo of meaning. Others claimed to see faces in the static of their screens. And then the dreams began. Across continents, millions reported the same vision. Standing beneath a sky of glass, surrounded by tall silver figures who said nothing but stared as if waiting. Always behind them, the same spiral of light. Always pulsing, always 13 seconds apart. Governments tried to suppress the panic, but fear is a contagion stronger than truth. Conspiracy channels flooded the networks with theories. The Council has launched psychic warfare. The obelisks were a portal. Earth is becoming something else. In the core spire, the Galactic Council's unease had curdled into fear. Their fleets had lost contact with Sigma Squadron, the armada sent to crush Earth. Not destroyed, not disabled, gone. Their signals vanished the moment the obelisks shattered. Entire vessels erased from subspace, no debris, no distress calls, just absence. Archon Kethar stood at the viewing platform, watching the pulse of the distant star through a massive crystalline window. The light reached even here, faint but undeniable. "It's begun," he said. His aide trembled. "What has begun, Excellency?" The awakening, Kethar whispered. The sleepers are stirring. For centuries the Council had hidden that name, the Sleepers. Beings older than the Council's founding, sealed away when the universe was still young. They were myths, ancient warnings. But myths often had roots deeper than truth itself. And now, one of their symbols burned in the sky of the outer spiral, anchored to a single defiant world. On Earth, Mara Quinn received an encrypted message routed through 30 different satellites. The sender's ID was unrecognized, but the content made her blood run cold. They will come for you. You've woken something the Council fears more than extinction. Attached was a single fragment of data, a visual file showing what looked like a ship drifting through the Kuiper Belt. Unlike any design on record, it was carved with fractal inscriptions that shifted even when paused. Its hull was made of something that absorbed light instead of reflecting it. Mara stared at it for a long time. This isn't human tech. No, Vance said from the screen, but it's heading straight for Earth. The following week was chaos wrapped in silence. Every telescope turned outward, tracking the incoming object. It wasn't fast, barely crawling at half the speed of light, but its trajectory was perfect, unwavering. The world watched as it crossed Neptune's orbit, a black wound against the stars. Meanwhile, in orbit, the surviving fragments of the obelisks began to move again, slowly, imperceptibly at first. They drifted toward one another, fusing into new geometric shapes that defied gravity. A single piece settled above the Arctic Circle, hovering like an eye over the pole. It pulsed once, matching the rhythm of the distant star. Everything's in sync, Mara whispered in the control room, eyes on the monitors. Earth, the star, and now this. It's like they're aligning for something. What kind of something? Vance asked. Before she could answer, the comms system screeched. A voice, metallic, distorted, layered, filled the room. Sequence confirmed. Anchor point stabilized, awaiting the chosen frequency. Technicians scrambled, shouting over one another, but Mara barely heard them. Her heart pounded. The reactor frequency, she said. It's still active in the magnetic field. That's what they're waiting for. Vance turned sharply. You're saying we could control it? I'm saying, she replied, we could respond. For a moment, hope flickered. A fragile, dangerous thing. But across the stars, that same pulse reached the core spire. The Council's sensors screamed as they detected the incoming object, one of the ancient vessels, unmistakably so. The old ones were real, and they were coming to the humans. Panic spread through the Council ranks. Some demanded they destroy Earth before contact occurred. Others wanted to flee, sealing the core spire in stasis. Only Kethar remained still, eyes closed. They will not destroy Earth, he murmured. They cannot. That world is the key. The humans have done what we swore never to do. They've called the architects. The word carried weight, even there. The architects were said to be the creators of the first star lanes, the ones who sculpted gravity, who wrote the rules of physics into the bones of reality. Their return meant change, unmaking, rebuilding, judgment. Back on Earth, the approaching vessel entered Mars orbit, broadcasting a single image toward humanity, a spiral of light forming within a ring of stone. To those watching, it looked almost like a door. Then came the voice again, clearer this time, no longer distorted. Earth, anchor of the fifth sequence, prepare the resonance. Mara stood before the global transmission panel, surrounded by flickering lights and half-broken screens. The message repeated across every frequency, translated automatically by the machines that once jammed Earth's first rebellion. Now they served a new master. Prepare the resonance. What does that even mean? A technician asked, panicked. Mara's eyes darkened. It means they're about to open something. Hours later the world trembled. Gravity itself seemed to flicker, oceans surged without wind. In the skies, the auroras twisted into vast spirals, each aligned toward the Arctic. From orbit, satellites captured the phenomenon. The magnetic field was being rewritten, sculpted into a pattern that resembled, almost perfectly, the insignia of the Council's forbidden archives. The mark of the architects. And then, for the first time in recorded history, the Council tried to speak directly to humanity. Their fleet appeared at the edge of the solar system, hundreds of vessels warping in at once, blotting out the stars. Their signal pierced every network. Humans of Earth, you do not understand what you have called. Cease your transmission. Seal your resonance. You are opening the tomb of the universe. Vance appeared on screen beside Mara, watching the message play out. "And if we refuse?" he asked quietly. The reply was immediate. "Then we will erase your world to save all others." Mara stared at the flickering monitors, then at the pulse of the new star still visible through the observation dome. "Erase us? They've already tried that, and still we're here." "Dr. Quinn," the Admiral beside her warned, "you're suggesting we defy them again after all this?" "I'm saying," she said, stepping closer to the control console, "we didn't start this alone, and we're not ending it alone either." She keyed in the reactor's reactivation code. The ground trembled. The sky above the Arctic split open with light. Across the galaxy, sensors flared once again. The pulse from the mysterious star intensified, then synchronized perfectly with Earth's magnetic field. The incoming black vessel accelerated, bending space around it like liquid glass. The Council fleet moved to intercept, and failed. Their weapons froze mid-fire. Their ships flickered out of alignment as if the universe itself rejected their commands. Kethar watched from the core spire, awe softening his fear. "It has begun," he whispered. "The architects are returning." On Earth, the Arctic skies ignited. A column of silver light shot upward, connecting planet and star, and within that radiance, something vast and translucent took form, a figure so immense it could not be measured, its outline fluid like smoke yet bright as dawn. Every living creature on Earth felt it, not through sight or sound, but through memory, as though the universe itself remembered its own maker. Mara fell to her knees, overwhelmed by the presence pressing against her mind. For a heartbeat, she saw everything. The Council's rise, their betrayal, their fear of the old ones who had built the pathways of time itself. Humanity had not called monsters. They had called their teachers. Then, as quickly as it appeared, the figure dissolved into light. The column vanished. The pulse stopped. In the silence that followed, every device on Earth flickered once, and a single phrase appeared across every screen, every wall, every surface capable of reflection. Sequence 1, complete. The world stood still. The Council fleet retreated. The black vessel descended toward Earth's orbit, its hull alive with motion like something breathing. Inside the command bunker, Mara looked at Vance. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from awe. "They answered us." And far beyond the stars, something else stirred in reply, vast, cold, and watching. Part 2 ended not with destruction, but with awakening. The defiance of one world had become the song of many, and the universe was beginning to listen. The black vessel drifted silently above Earth like a second moon, motionless, serene, and impossibly ancient. Its surface shimmered with invisible geometry, patterns that rearranged themselves faster than the human eye could follow. At night, people could see it from the ground, a faint outline blotting out stars, surrounded by a thin halo of light. And though it made no sound, every living creature felt its presence, a quiet pulse that vibrated in the bones, a whisper that seemed to ask, "Do you remember me?" For days no one dared approach it. The Council fleets had retreated to the edge of the solar system, fearful to enter a zone that now defied their sensors. Probes sent toward Earth simply vanished, as if the space between planets had turned liquid, swallowing all attempts to observe. It was as though the solar system itself had gone dark, wrapped in a veil that permitted only one truth. Earth had become unreachable, unclassifiable, something other. And inside that silence, the black ship waited. Dr. Mara Quinn watched it through the reinforced dome of the orbital station Astraeus 1. Her reflection stared back from the glass, tired, hollow-eyed, hair pulled into a ragged braid. Behind her, the hum of machinery filled the air, punctuated by distant chatter as the crew struggled to keep systems stable. "Telemetry's fading again," her assistant reported. "Every time we try to map its gravitational field, the data folds back on itself. It's rewriting the math as we record it." Mara didn't turn. Her eyes stayed fixed on the ship. "It's not rewriting the math," she said quietly. "It's reminding us that our math is too small." She closed her eyes, listening to the rhythm that still pulsed faintly in her skull. Ever since the architect's signal had awakened, her perception had changed. She could hear things she couldn't name, low vibrations that felt like thought rippling beneath the world's noise. Sometimes in dreams, she stood inside that same light she'd seen over the Arctic, and she heard voices whispering across galaxies. She was terrified to admit that she understood them. Below, on Earth, humanity struggled to reconcile what had happened. The governments had fractured, some calling for alliance, others for quarantine, still others demanding vengeance. The pulse from the architects had left physical marks. Cities where electronics behaved like living organisms, forests glowing faintly at night, oceans shifting in color as if infused with starlight. People had begun to change too. Reports flooded in of resonant individuals, humans whose neural activity synchronized with the pulse. Some could feel magnetic fields, others could predict atmospheric changes, and a few claimed to sense emotions across distances. The media called them echoes, the council called them contaminated, and somewhere deep beneath the Arctic ice, where the architect's first light had touched the Earth, something else was waking. Mara received the signal just after midnight, a harmonic tremor so deep it rattled the entire station. The sensors screamed with interference, alarms blaring through the halls. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. On her monitor, a new message appeared. Impossible, untranslated, made of symbols that pulsed with their own light. When the computer attempted to interpret it, a single phrase emerged, rendered in the soft, cold clarity of her own voice. "Child of resonance, approach the threshold." Mara stared, heart pounding. "Approach the threshold," she repeated, as if saying it might make it real. Minutes later, the station's lights flickered, and every screen on board displayed an image. The black ship, opening. A thin slit appeared along its hull, unfurling like an iris. From within came a beam of light that wasn't light at all. It bent shadows, turned metal translucent, and carried no heat. It reached toward Earth, tracing a path through the atmosphere until it connected with the Arctic pole. Mara's breath caught. "It's linking to the resonance field." She didn't hesitate. She launched a shuttle within the hour, against protocol, against orders, against fear itself. She couldn't explain why, only that the signal inside her mind had become impossible to ignore. The voice, the one she had dreamed of for weeks, was calling. As she entered the beam, reality seemed to fracture. Time slowed, sound distorted, and for an instant, she saw everything at once. The stars, the pulse, the memory of the architects engraved in light. Then came silence, and a sensation like falling upward. When vision returned, her shuttle was gone. She stood alone on a plane of glass under a violet sky. The horizon stretched endlessly, dotted with monolithic structures that hummed with familiar rhythm. She recognized the pattern. They were scaled echoes of the obelisks that had once hovered above Earth. A figure approached from the distance, tall, slender, and shifting like heat haze. Its outline was vaguely humanoid, but every motion carried the weight of millennia. "Where am I?" she whispered. The being's voice resonated directly in her thoughts. "Within the fold, between what is and what was. You opened it when you answered the sequence." Mara's pulse quickened. "You're one of them. The architects." "I am an echo of their design," it replied. "A memory given shape to speak with you." "Why me?" she asked. "Why humanity?" For a moment, the being said nothing. The air shimmered with light that pulsed like breathing. "Because you remembered how to say no," it said at last. The council forgot that sound. They built order upon obedience and named it peace. But creation was never born from silence, it was born from defiance. Mara stepped closer, awed. "You called us an anchor," she said. "What does that mean?" The being tilted its head. "The universe drifts. Entropy pulls all thought towards stillness. To create is to resist that stillness. You are the latest world to ignite resistance. The next sequence begins with you." Her breath caught. "The next sequence?" Before it could answer, the sky cracked open with light. The plane trembled. Somewhere distant, the sound of thunder. Not weather, but war. The being turned sharply toward the horizon. "They found you." In that instant, she felt the presence. Cold, metallic, vast. The council. Their ships had pierced the fold, their desperation driving them beyond reason. The being's voice grew urgent. "You must return. The threshold cannot remain open. If they enter, the architect's memory will collapse." "How do I—" But before she could finish, the being placed a hand upon her chest. The world inverted. When she opened her eyes again, she was back aboard the shuttle, drifting in orbit. Earth glowed below her, the Arctic beam flickering out like a dying flame. Her communications console was alive with static, and over it came the voice of President Vance, strained and crackling with panic. "Mara, do you copy? The council fleet's moving in. They're declaring Earth under quarantine. They're calling it a contagion event." She tried to answer, but her hands trembled too hard to grip the controls. In her mind, the words of the architect's echo still rang like a heartbeat. To create is to resist stillness. Down on Earth, the resonant individuals, the echoes, began to convulse simultaneously. Sensors picked up bursts of quantum energy radiating from their bodies. The planet's magnetic field started to oscillate, mimicking their pulse. And somewhere deep below the surface, the crust itself began to hum. In the Council Fleet's command vessel, Archon Kethar watched the readings in horror. "They're merging," he whispered. "Humanity is becoming part of the network. Then we must cut them off," another Archon hissed, "before they stabilize the sequence." Kethar turned toward him, voice low. "You think destruction will save you? The architects built the lattice beneath our reality. If they awaken fully, no empire, no council, no star will escape their design." But it was too late. Orders had already been given. The fleet charged its planetary lances, aiming not at Earth's cities, but at its poles. In the Arctic Circle, the ice cracked and groaned. The ground split open, revealing the blackened remains of the original reactor, and beneath it, a vast chamber of impossible architecture, dormant until that moment. Mara's sensors captured it all. "Oh God," she breathed. "It's not a crater, it's a door." Energy surged from within the Earth, intercepting the Council's first blast. The beam dissolved mid-flight, scattering into harmless light. Then came a sound, low, resonant, and ancient. Not a weapon, but a voice. Every mind, human or alien, heard it. "You were warned." Across the galaxy, stars flickered. Council ships malfunctioned, systems blinked out. And for a brief, terrifying moment, reality itself seemed to hesitate. Mara felt it inside her chest. The same pulse, now magnified 1,000-fold. The voice of the architects filling her veins. It wasn't rage, it was disappointment. The Council's fleet began to crumble, not from fire, but from within. Their technology, built upon stolen relics of the architects, turned against them. Ships folded inward, collapsing into luminous spirals that vanished without trace. Then, silence. Only Kethar's vessel remained intact. He stood before the void, trembling. "You cannot unmake us," he said aloud, though no one answered. "We were born from you." A whisper filled his mind. "Then act like it." And the connection severed. On Earth the skies cleared. The black vessel above the planet shifted, reconfiguring into a new shape. A ring encircling the world, glowing faintly with silver light. Humanity watched in awe as the ring stabilized, projecting a vast lattice into orbit. It wasn't a weapon, it was a bridge. Mara landed days later, greeted by silence and wonder. Everywhere she went, people moved as if caught between fear and reverence. The echoes had stabilized, their pulses syncing with the planet's core frequency. Earth was alive in a way it had never been before, thinking, breathing, aware. In the quiet of the Arctic ruins, she found the words of the architect echoing again in her thoughts. "You are the next sequence." She sank to her knees, staring at the glowing ice. "We didn't summon gods," she whispered. "We became their memory." And in that moment, something inside her shifted, a realization blooming slow and cold. The architects hadn't chosen Earth to awaken them. They had chosen Earth because they needed successors. The bridge in orbit pulsed once, sending ripples through the atmosphere. The oceans brightened in response. The stars above flickered as if watching. Then came a new signal, so faint it almost went unnoticed. It wasn't from the architects, it wasn't from the Council, it was from somewhere beyond the galactic rim. A voice soft and distant speaking in perfect human cadence. "If you can hear this, we're not the first Earth." The transmission cut, and for the first time since the awakening, Mara felt the warmth of fear return. For hours after the signal ended, no one spoke. Inside the control bunker beneath Geneva, the words hung in the air like smoke. "We're not the first Earth." Every recording had been verified, every frequency cross-checked. The voice was human, tone, syntax, even the faint tremor of fear embedded in the transmission. And yet the source coordinates didn't exist. The signal came from beyond the known galactic rim, outside mapped space, outside time, as the Council understood it. Dr. Mara Quinn sat alone before the holo display, replaying the message again and again, her reflection flickering between frames. "If you can hear this, we're not the first Earth." She whispered the words under her breath, trying to understand their weight. Not the first. Did that mean there had been others? Other Earths, other awakenings, other sequences that had risen and vanished before hers? President Vance entered quietly, his uniform rumpled, eyes sleepless. "We trace the source," he said. Or tried to. "The coordinates point beyond the Perseus Gap, past the cosmic boundary where dark space begins. Nothing exists there, not according to the Council's records." Mara turned to face him, her voice calm but taut. The Council's records were written by those who erased history that didn't serve them. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. The ring in orbit just shifted alignment, it's pointing toward those coordinates. The bridge. She exhaled slowly. It's not just a monument, it's a map. Outside the bunker, the ring around Earth pulsed faintly in the dawn sky, its silver surface alive with slow-moving light. All around the world, people watched and waited, uncertain whether it was a beacon or a warning. In orbit, fragments of the old obelisks had fused into lattice clusters that hovered like satellites, silent guardians or observers. The planet itself had stabilized into a new equilibrium. Storms calmed faster, magnetic fields strengthened, and faint bioluminescence rippled through the oceans at night. Earth was transforming, subtly, purposefully, but with transformation came unease. Reports of strange phenomena multiplied, echoes who no longer felt human, cities where the boundaries between matter and light blurred. People waking from dreams of other worlds that felt more real than their own. Mara felt it too. Every night she dreamed of a second Earth, one wrapped in violet haze, orbiting a dying sun. The people there looked like them, familiar faces, familiar cities, but older, weary, and broken. Each time she reached for them, the vision dissolved into light. She didn't tell anyone. Some truths grew teeth when spoken aloud. 2 days after the signal, the bridge activated. No warning, no tremor or pulse, just a shift, like the sky itself exhaled. The ring brightened, forming a vortex at its center, a whirlpool of soft luminescence bending gravity and color. Satellites nearby were pulled toward it but didn't collide. They orbited the center like moons around an invisible star. From the Arctic station, where the resonance field had first emerged, scientists watched in awe. "The bridge is opening," one whispered, "but it's not pulling anything in. It's inviting." Mara received the transmission at 0300 hours. "Inviting what?" she asked. A pause. Then softly, "You." The voice wasn't the scientist's. It was something older, threaded through the comms with impossible clarity. Mara froze. It was the same tone she had heard in the fold, the echo of the architects. She rose from her console and walked to the viewing glass. Outside, the bridge shimmered like a portal of liquid light, its reflection stretching across the night sea. "You said we're the next sequence," she whispered. "Is this what you meant? To follow where the others went?" Silence answered her, but it was a living silence, the kind that breathes between heartbeats. The following morning, the council reappeared. Their flagship arrived at the edge of the solar system, its hull scarred and trembling. Kethar led them personally, though most of his peers were gone. His face appeared in the planetary transmission, a ghost framed by dying light. "Humans of Earth," he said, his voice heavy with something almost like respect. "You stand upon the threshold of the last sequence. If you cross that bridge, you will not return." Vance faced the transmission screen, his jaw set. "You came to destroy us before. Why warn us now?" Kethar's gaze lingered. "Because I have seen what waits beyond that threshold. We were not the first empire, as you were not the first world. The architects built countless realms, iterations of existence. Each one believed it was the center. Each one awakened, and each one fell." Mara stepped forward, voice steady. "What destroyed them?" The Archon's eyes dimmed. "The truth." Before anyone could respond, the signal cut. For a long moment, no one spoke. Outside, the bridge pulsed again, its light no longer calm but urgent, rhythmic, almost pleading. Later that night, Mara stood on the surface, surrounded by the glow of the northern ice. The beam of the bridge shimmered above her like an open wound in the sky. Around her, the echoes had gathered in silence, hundreds of them, their eyes reflecting starlight, their breaths synced with the pulse. "You all feel it, don't you?" she said softly. "The pull, like something familiar calling from far away." A young echo nodded. "It's like hearing a memory that isn't ours." She looked up at the swirling portal. Maybe it is ours. Maybe it always was. And yet, beneath the wonder, dread coiled. She remembered the architect's words. "You are the next sequence, not chosen, not blessed, simply next." Was this how it had always gone? Civilizations rising, defying, awakening, only to vanish, leaving fragments behind for others to find. The weight of it pressed on her chest until breathing hurt. Then, without warning, the bridge spoke. The voice rolled across the sky, deep and resonant, vibrating through the ice, the air, the blood. Child of resonance, the door has been prepared. Enter, or the sequence will fail. The echoes fell to their knees, overwhelmed by the sound. Mara's communicator flared with Vance's voice. Mara, you're hearing this too, right? We're picking up dimensional distortion. The bridge is destabilizing. How long? She asked. Minutes, maybe less. She stared at the light twisting above her. If we don't enter, then the energy will collapse inward. It could erase everything. Erase everything. The words echoed, hollow and final. She turned to the gathered echoes. If what the council said is true, that bridge doesn't lead to salvation. It leads to the same place every world before us disappeared. One of them, a woman barely out of her teens, looked up, trembling. Then why open it? Mara hesitated. Because maybe the only way to break the cycle is to walk through it. The storm above thickened. The light of the bridge bent downward, drawing closer to the ice. Reality began to hum like a stretched string. From orbit, the black ship flared to life again, reacting to the bridge. Its hull reconfigured, revealing symbols that matched those of the architect's archives. It was aligning, preparing. In the control room, Vance watched helplessly. She's not going to make it out, he said to no one in particular. If she steps in, she's gone. Mara took one last look at the horizon. The endless expanse of ice. The faint shimmer of auroras twisting above like silk. She thought of the first act of defiance, the one that started it all. 13 seconds of courage that had echoed across the stars. Defiance, she whispered. It always comes at a cost. The echoes watched as she stepped into the column of light. The air rippled. Her body dissolved into fractal sparks, drawn upward into the vortex. For an instant, she felt herself everywhere. Every particle of air, every pulse of the earth, every trembling atom of the universe. And then, darkness. When she opened her eyes, she was standing on a world that wasn't Earth. The sky was crimson, and 2 moons hung low above jagged mountains of obsidian. Beneath her feet stretched a city half buried in ash, familiar architecture, eerily human. Streets overgrown with luminous vines, buildings etched with the same symbols she'd seen on the architect's relics. She knew this place from her dreams. The violet haze, the broken towers, the other Earth. Wind howled through the ruins, carrying whispers that weren't voices but fragments of memory. The pulse was weaker here, fading in and out like a dying heartbeat. She stepped forward, the ground crunching beneath her boots. In the distance, a figure stood among the ruins, facing her. It was human, or close to it, a man with silver-gray eyes and a face carved by time. He looked at her with something between recognition and sorrow. "You heard the signal," he said softly. "Then it's true. The sequence has begun again." Mara froze. "You sent it, the message." He nodded. "We thought we were the first two. We thought we could resist the pull, but every Earth before ours made the same mistake. We looked outward instead of within." Her heart pounded. "What are you saying?" Mara turned toward the horizon, where the remains of a colossal ring, identical to the one above her own Earth, hung shattered against the sky. Lightning arced across its surface, illuminating the ruins below. She whispered almost to herself, "If this is a loop, then every defiance only feeds it." The man nodded slowly. "Unless someone finds the courage to end it." The ground shook again. The city began to collapse inward, drawn toward a blinding point of light at its center. Mara felt the pull of it, the same resonance calling her home, but now it sounded different. Not a summons, a hunger. She looked back at the man. If I go back through that bridge, what happens? He met her eyes. Then your world becomes the next Earth in the sequence. The light intensified, swallowing the horizon. She turned toward it, heart hammering, realization cutting through her like cold steel. All this time, humanity had believed their defiance had awakened something divine. But what if it had only restarted a cycle older than creation itself? The ground split beneath her feet. The air screamed. She braced herself against the wind, eyes locked on the collapsing ring, and whispered to the storm, "Then maybe defiance means breaking everything." The light surged. The world began to fall inward, and just as the brilliance consumed her, a voice echoed through the chaos. Soft, ancient, familiar. "Mara Quinn, you were never chosen. You were remembered." Then, silence. And the light swallowed her whole. Silence, not the absence of sound, something deeper. The kind of silence that feels alive, pressing against the skin, listening. Mara floated within it, her body weightless, her thoughts dissolving into light. For a long time there was nothing but white, infinite, formless white. Then, movement. Shapes bled into existence, fractals coiling like living glass, memories flickering like stars. The first launch from Earth's orbit, the tremor of the fold awakening, the face of President Vance reflected in blue light. Fragments of her life suspended around her, looping endlessly. "Mara Quinn," a voice whispered, not through sound, but directly through her mind. It was vast, resonant, both male and female, both ancient and new. "You have reached the center of the sequence." Her heartbeat slowed to a fragile rhythm. "Where am I?" "In the space between endings, the place where all iterations meet before dissolution." The white mist rippled, and suddenly she was standing on solid ground. A marble plain stretched to the horizon, crystalline structures rising like cathedrals made of frozen time. Above, the sky was a tapestry of shifting galaxies, folding and unfolding, revealing countless worlds suspended in the dark, each one a different version of Earth. Every one of them was dying. Cities crumbled in silence, oceans boiled to steam, skies dimmed into shadow, billions of lives reduced to particles of light drifting upward, merging into the great cosmic storm that surrounded her. She fell to her knees. All of them, every Earth. The voice spoke again, softer now. Each sequence believed it was the first. Each believed its defiance mattered. "Then why?" she whispered. "Why let us rise if it all ends here?" The light pulsed faintly, as if the universe itself sighed. "Because the architects are not gods, they are patterns, echoes of creation seeking form. Every world they birth is a question asked again and again. Can consciousness transcend itself? And no one ever did. Not yet." Mara rose slowly, her hands trembling. So that's what the bridge was, a test. The air shimmered, and the figure of the man from the ruined Earth appeared beside her. His eyes were weary, but kind. "It's not just a test. It's the mechanism. Every world creates the energy for the next. Every rebellion powers the birth of another. The cycle sustains itself through our defiance." She turned toward him sharply. "Then defiance is the trap." He nodded. "Yes. But it's also the only part of us that's real." For a long moment, Mara said nothing. The galaxies above shifted again, revealing the faint outline of her own Earth, small and trembling within the cosmic lattice. She could see it, the pulse of its core, the bridge still open, the people waiting, believing she was saving them. "If I return," she said quietly, "the loop begins again." The man met her gaze. "If you return as you are." She frowned. "What do you mean?" He extended his hand, and the ground beneath them transformed. Suddenly they were standing in the ruins of his city again, the violet haze curling through empty towers. Every sequence fails because it carries its past forward. We build new worlds on the bones of the old. The architects don't destroy us. We do, by remembering too much. Mara turned away. You're saying the only way to end it is to forget. No, he said. The only way to end it is to forgive. The words hung between them, strange and weighty. Forgive, not the architects, not the cycles, but themselves, for the endless need to rebel, to conquer, to prove worthiness to something that never asked. The ground began to tremble. Above them the red sky split open, light pouring through the fractures like liquid fire. The sequence was collapsing. He looked at her with something like hope. Every world that came before us believed destruction was the only escape. Maybe yours can be different. Mara felt the pull again, the bridge calling her home, Earth's heartbeat echoing in her veins. If I break the cycle, she said, what happens to all of this? He smiled faintly. Maybe it ends. Maybe it begins again differently. Maybe that's the same thing. Lightning arced through the crimson clouds, and the plain beneath them cracked apart, shards of marble spiraling upward into the light. The man began to fade, his outline dissolving into the air. Wait, she cried. Who were you? What sequence are you from? He looked at her one last time, his form now only a shimmer. I think, the one right before yours. Then he was gone. Mara stood alone as the world fractured around her. The bridge above blazed brighter, a vortex of raw creation. She felt its pull like gravity itself, inviting her, tempting her, demanding she complete what countless others had failed to. She took a step forward, then stopped. All her life, she had believed defiance was strength, that to resist was to exist. But standing here, at the edge of all creation, she saw it differently. Defiance without understanding was just another form of obedience, to the same repeating pattern. She closed her eyes. No more. Instead of stepping toward the bridge, she knelt. She placed her hands on the ground, feeling the vibration of the dying world beneath her palms. The pulse of every sequence resonated through her. The countless lives, the hopes, the mistakes. And she began to hum. A simple tone at first, low and human. It grew louder, layered, until the air shimmered with sound. The hum spread through the ground, through the light, through the fragments of time itself. The resonance shifted. The bridge faltered. In orbit above her Earth, scientists gasped as the energy readings reversed polarity. The vortex that had been expanding began to fold inward, like a flower closing in slow motion. Vance watched from the command station, his heart pounding. What's happening? A technician's voice trembled. It's collapsing, but not violently. It's harmonizing. The ring in the sky dimmed, then began to dissolve, scattering its light gently into the atmosphere. On the surface, the echoes looked up, their eyes wide. The pulse that had bound them for months softened into a steady rhythm, the rhythm of a heartbeat. Back in the collapsing realm, Mara felt everything unraveling, her body, her thoughts, her memories, all dissolving into the hum. Yet she felt no fear. For the first time, she wasn't resisting, she was releasing. The voice of the architects returned, distant now, fading. You are altering the pattern. This is not permitted. She smiled through tears. Then you shouldn't have made us human. The white light flared, fracturing into colors she had no name for. The marble plane cracked open, revealing an endless void beneath. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was full of potential. Every sequence she'd seen, every dying world, flickered one last time. Instead of vanishing, their light merged into the void, weaving new constellations across the cosmic expanse. The cycle wasn't destroyed, it was redefined. Mara's form began to dissolve completely now, her voice barely a whisper. If defiance built the bridge, maybe forgiveness can close it. And then, with a final breath, she let go. The light imploded silently. On Earth, dawn broke without thunder. The skies were clear for the first time in generations. The orbital ring was gone. No debris, no ruins, just an empty sky. But something new lingered in the air, an invisible calm, as if the planet itself had exhaled. In the control bunker, Vance stared at the data feed. Every anomaly, every strange reading, the resonance, the distortion, all gone. The world had stabilized. "She did it," he whispered. "Somehow she did it." Across the planet, people woke to stillness. Oceans shimmered with strange, luminous patterns that faded with the morning sun. The echoes felt something lift from them, like a weight they never realized they carried. And in that silence, humanity felt truly alone again. But it wasn't fear this time. It was peace. Weeks passed. The bridge never reopened. The council never returned. The stars, once filled with unknown watchers, seemed quiet now, distant but benevolent. One night, Vance stood by the ocean, the horizon glowing faintly with aurora. He spoke to the waves as if she could hear him. "You broke their loop, Mara. I just hope you're somewhere it finally ends." The wind whispered back, soft and indistinct, but for a brief moment it sounded like her voice. Far beyond the visible cosmos, in a realm without name, a new light flickered. Small, steady, human. And for the first time in all recorded sequences, the architects did not intervene. They watched in silence as something unexpected grew within the void, a pulse not of command or repetition, but of choice. Mara's consciousness drifted there, somewhere between memory and being. She no longer had form, but she felt the warmth of creation flow through her. The worlds that had come before were gone, but their essence, every thought, every act of love, every defiance, lived on in her. She understood now. The architects had sought to build perfection through repetition, but perfection was sterile. Life wasn't about infinite cycles. It was about the courage to end one. And in that end, something new could begin. The void around her rippled, not with destruction, but with birth. Tiny sparks ignited, spreading outward, forming galaxies of possibility, each one unique, each one free. Mara smiled into the light that was both her and everything. Let it be different this time. And the universe answered. Not with words, but with the quiet hum of creation restarting, not as a sequence, but as a song. The stars were quieter now. Not silent, never silent, but softer, like the universe itself was breathing again after holding its breath for eons. From Earth, they shimmered brighter than anyone remembered, unfiltered by the lattice of alien watchtowers or the invisible hum of council frequencies. The night sky belonged to humanity once more. On a quiet ridge above the Pacific, a small observatory hummed faintly against the wind. Its glass dome was cracked but functional, patched together by hands that refused to let history fade. Inside, Dr. Amir Patel leaned over a console, eyes tracing the same coordinates every astronomer had been obsessed with since the day the bridge vanished. No anomalies, no residual readings, just clean, empty space. He leaned back, rubbing his temples. "If it's really over," he murmured to himself, "why does it feel like she's still out there?" The computer's interface pulsed once, faintly like a heartbeat. Then it went still again. Far above, the auroras had changed. They moved differently now, slower, deliberate, as if tracing words across the upper atmosphere. To those who still watched the skies, they seemed to form patterns no one could quite read but everyone felt. People called it the whisper light. Scientists said it was magnetic decay. Poets said it was the universe remembering her name. The world healed in silence. Months passed, and cities once buried in fear began to breathe again. The oceans stabilized, the resonance fields faded completely. The echoes, those touched by the pulse, found themselves slowly returning to ordinary human rhythms. Some retained fragments of the old connection, like faint melodies half-remembered from a dream. They said they could still feel her, like warmth under the skin whenever they looked toward the stars. President Vance retired from office not long after. He'd become quieter, slower, more deliberate with his words. On the final day of his presidency, he stood before the United Nations, no longer a gathering under the Council's shadow, but of free worlds, rebuilt and raw. "We once thought freedom meant defiance," he said, his voice steady but gentle, "that to be human was to resist. But perhaps what she showed us was something greater, that freedom isn't resistance, it's understanding. It's knowing when to hold on and when to let go." He paused, his eyes flickering to the window, where the auroras shimmered faintly above the horizon. Dr. Mara Quinn gave us that choice. And maybe that's all life ever needed, a chance to choose its own rhythm. When he stepped down, he refused interviews. He moved to a small coastal town, teaching philosophy at a local school, walking the cliffs each evening at sunset. The locals said he often stopped to watch the horizon, as if expecting someone to walk out of the light. But no one ever did. For the first time in recorded history, humanity was truly alone, and it wasn't terrifying, it was peaceful. And yet, somewhere deep beneath that peace, the echo remained. In the decades that followed, strange things began to happen again, but differently, not catastrophic, not divine, gentle, a seed found growing in stone, a storm that ended itself mid-surge, a child born with eyes that reflected galaxies for just a moment before fading to normal. The scientists who studied these events found no patterns, no laws to explain them. But those who had once felt the resonance recognized the signature immediately. Creation, not directed, not engineered, but alive, evolving, spontaneous. Earth had become its own architect, and perhaps that was the point all along. In a small museum in New Geneva, beneath a glass case lit by soft light, lay Mara Quinn's final message. The audio recovered from her last transmission before she entered the bridge. The recording was faint, corrupted, but one line remained perfectly clear. "If you ever hear the stars hum again, don't be afraid. It only means they're listening." Visitors often lingered there longer than expected. Something about her voice made the world feel both larger and closer at once. Children asked who she was. The curators answered simply, "The one who remembered." Years later, a probe was launched toward the Perseus Gap, the place where the bridge had first pointed, now a silent region of unmeasurable depth. It carried a single engraved message on its hull. "For those who came before, and those yet to come, may we meet not in defiance, but in peace." When the probe vanished into the dark, no one expected a reply. Yet decades later, a faint signal returned. It wasn't words or numbers, just a frequency. The same tone Mara had hummed before the bridge closed. The same hum that had once resonated through the bones of the earth. It spread quietly across the networks. People began to hear it in the background of recordings, in the static of old radios, in the silence between heartbeats. Not loud enough to frighten, just enough to remind. Maybe the cycle hadn't ended completely. Maybe it had simply changed its shape. Because somewhere in that formless realm beyond light and matter, consciousness drifted, soft, endless, awake. Mara felt no body now, no boundaries. She was the pulse between worlds, the pause between beginnings and endings. She saw them all, the old Earths, the fallen sequences, the new one still shining blue in the darkness. She saw the architects too, but not as she once had. They were no longer vast beings of power. They were patterns unraveling, humbled by what they couldn't control. And in the calm that followed, something unexpected happened. One by one, the dying sequences began to glow again, not with the sterile light of replication, but with the soft warmth of memory. They weren't being restored, they were being forgiven. Their failures, their defiance, their longing, all accepted, absorbed into the fabric of the new creation she had set in motion. From that stillness, a realization bloomed, not like knowledge, but like love. The architects hadn't been the enemy, they had simply been the echo of creation trying to understand itself, just as humans had. The cycle wasn't cruelty, it was longing. The universe yearning to know its own reflection through infinite forms. And now, for the first time, it could rest. Her awareness expanded beyond the fold of galaxies. Stars pulsed like heartbeats, nebulae swayed like ocean currents, and within the silence between photons, she could hear something. Faint, fragile, unmistakably human. Laughter. Not from a single place, but everywhere. Generations born after her time, living freely, unafraid of the void. Children running beneath alien suns. Voices singing not to conquer the stars, but to join them. That was her answer. That was the meaning hidden beneath all the defiance and collapse. Creation didn't need to be perfect. It only needed to be alive enough to begin again. And perhaps that was what it meant to be remembered. Not as a god, not as a savior, but as a question that kept inspiring the next breath, the next song, the next act of kindness in a vast and uncertain cosmos. Light spread outward. The universes, once separate, began to converge, not collapsing, but overlapping gently, like waves merging on a calm shore. Space became music, time became rhythm. And in that quiet harmony, Mara's presence began to fade, not into nothingness, but into everything. Her final thought drifted outward, soft as a whisper carried by starlight. If every ending is only another beginning, then maybe the universe isn't asking us to win. Maybe it's asking us to understand. And somewhere, across the distant edge of existence, a newborn star flickered to life. It burned with a familiar warmth, a defiant human glow that pulsed once, twice, then steadied. The light traveled billions of years before touching Earth's night sky, faint but visible, resting above the horizon like a heartbeat frozen in time. Children saw it first. They named it Quinn's star. And when people looked up at it, they felt something they couldn't explain. Not awe, not fear, just a quiet sense that maybe, in some vast and tender way, they had finally been seen. The universe turned gently onward. Not as a machine of cycles, but as a story retold through every soul that ever wondered why the stars existed at all. And beneath that endless sky, humanity, small, imperfect, luminous, continued to hum. Not in defiance, not in worship, just in harmony. Because in the end, perhaps that was the lesson the galaxies had been whispering all along, that the truest act of creation is simply to keep singing, even after the song has ended.